So welcome everybody to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. We have the return of Mr. Malibu, Cary ONeal, who lives in Malibu. We've had him in the past where he is working on saving a parcel of land from overdevelopment. So if you want to see more on that, you can go to our webpage or go to ExoTV and look up Mr. Malibu. But on that, we are talking energy today, and energy specifically in Malibu. So Cary, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much. And what would you like to share with us today?
Thank you. Thank you for having this show, and hopefully we can reach more people and communicate what took place on Thanksgiving, which was that the entire city of Malibu was had all their electricity cut off
Ooh,
because it was windy,
okay.
and it's a new policy that Edison is enacting. And in essence, to quote, call a spade, they inflicted grievous damages as a result of their negligence, causing the Woolsey fire, and now they're punishing the customer by cutting off their power every time it gets windy, so that they can prevent another uh, you know situation like the Woolsey fire.
Right.
So, but I have some objections to this policy, and part of the objection is that the California Public Utilities Commission is it's almost laughable. Just I'm expressing my own personal opinion. They're laughable. They're missing in action. It's not even missing in action. They're actually, quote, in the back pocket, unquote, of the electric company, as opposed to doing what the public is suggesting or demanding that they do. And I
Okay.
think this problem is twofold. But right out the gate, I would say that the public was not going to say anything as long as they were receiving electricity at reasonable rates and it was a reliable service. Everybody was okay
Yeah.
until such time as they start messing with the rates to a point where they've turned it into a three-ring circus and making it impossible for the customer to even figure out what rates to choose. And they're claiming that they are no longer the deliverer of the electricity, but they're a middleman for many other sources of electricity. And then they send you a chart with all these different sources of electricity and why the rates are different. And they've created a huge obfuscation and basically a headache for the customer to try to figure out. They're saying you can choose what rate to pay, but they've made it so complex. It's a joke. So anyway, maybe I could start by reading the correspondence that I sent to the mayor of Malibu,
Okay.
and just to share here in this meeting that I have heard from many people all over Malibu expressing total dissent and objection to the fact that they're just going to cut off the power every time it gets windy, and the fact that they did that almost without warning and destroyed Thanksgiving for everybody. You know,
That is, yeah, that's not good. So yeah, please read the letter that you sent.
okay. Did you hear of anybody else who said that their Thanksgiving was ruined?
Yeah, my sister-in-law lives in Malibu,
Mhm.
and she simply emailed us saying, well, Thanksgiving's not happening. And the unfortunate side effect that is happening in Malibu, as elsewhere, is people are buying gasoline or petroleum powered generators. Those are high fire risks and they're pollutant. So it's not a great resolution.
Correct. And so I have some interesting things to report about solutions to this challenge that I received coincidentally yesterday in the market. My friend Jeffrey, who is a pilot for private jet aircraft, and his home burned down in Malibu. And he said he got a huge amount of money. He didn't say how much from
Okay.
Edison, admitting that they caused the fire. And he said that in the meantime, he has a solution with solar and lithium batteries to power his whole thing over there.
Yeah.
So, and his house is almost ready to go. It's almost completed. His rebuilt house that burnt down, and he's going to be almost completely on solar, which is very exciting. So in any event, maybe that's the good that will come out of this,
Hopefully, yeah.
what I consider to be sort of business malice coming from Edison's policy. But I'll just read what I sent to the mayor of Malibu. His name is Paul Grisanti, and I CC'd all the council members in Malibu and the California Public Utilities Commission and the Southern California Edison as well. They're all recipients of this correspondence.
Okay.
Okay. Dear Paul, Edison and related companies have been fully aware upon their very inception that the state of California has had severe Santa Ana winds and severe fires for at least the past 14,000 years. They know that it comes with the low chaparral terrain. Okay, Edison had no right in the very beginning to willfully place dangerous power lines up on poles, placing people, wildlife, and structures in harm's way. Edison has no right to install any equipment anywhere that is not capable of withstanding 100-mile-per-hour Santa Ana winds, since they know it can happen.
Yeah.
Okay. The California Public Utilities Commission has finally gone over the edge in criminal negligence in allowing Edison criminal negligence in summarily shutting off everyone's power every time it is windy, when in fact the power lines should have been placed underground in the first place. So they're punishing the customer because they negligently put those power lines up on the poles in the first place. Okay. This email will confirm our demand that the city of Malibu, the California Public Utilities Commission, and Edison cease and desist from participating in or approving any further criminal shutdowns based on irresponsible practices that will no longer be accepted by capital the people.
Okay.
And then it says, furthermore, Edison must be required to provide generator backup power to each and every home in Malibu if any further shutdowns take place. Paul, enough is enough, and you are urged to take a stand against the above described wrongful activity. Your Malibu friend, Cary ONeal.
That's an intense letter. There's a lot in there. I mean, just for people to get a little background, high winds, overhead wires, they blow down. They have sparked some wildfires in Malibu as well as other areas. So there is a debate, bury these underground. I do know from talking to some people in the energy industry, I haven't talked to SoCal Edison, but just other people I know that work in energy. And one person several years ago posed the idea to Pasadena to bury the lines. And they said it would take 120 years to put them all underground. That was their estimate.
It's not true. That's not true.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, this is just, conversations I've had in passing with people. They're like, hey, what about doing this? And just the billions, if not trillions of dollars to do it, which again could be I'm guessing here, right?
Just also not true. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a lot to address. And have you gotten any responses from SoCal Edison or the mayor?
No, I have not received any response. And which is also, it's, we don't know. First of all, this is indicative of what's broken with the whole entire system.
Yeah.
Our government, from city to state to federal government, this is what's broken. And I think it's a valuable conversation to start shining light, because I actually produced a video that demonstrated, and this is not a diversion, but it shows exactly the same challenge. is when Gretchen Carlson did a interview with Maria Shriver. I was there present at the filmed interview, and she stood up for her rights to not be sexually harassed on the job, in the workplace. And she won her case against Bill O'Reilly. I think, they sued him or something or other. And then she was there advocating to the audience of, a couple hundred people and to everybody listening on the internet, that if you would please, contact your congressman or your senator, send them a letter telling them that you do not approve of these men getting away with this in the workplace, and so on and so on. And I raised my hand and I told her, and I said, you know what the problem with that is that any congressman or senator can receive 10 million letters and they're not required to do anything. They're not even required to so much as acknowledge that they received emails or letters. This is a broken system. This is a farce against the people. And it goes way deeper than that. Why should one congressman represent millions of people? It just is, the whole system is, if you start to go under the microscope, you see these unbelievable gaping flaws that could not possibly enact something called a democratic process.
Well, we're a republic. We're a republic.
Yeah.
That's where we have individuals representing the masses rather than the masses voting to do things.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there are flaws in that. There's no doubt.
And not to introduce such a big philosophical morass that we, that nothing happens, but I'm just pointing out that there is a solution, though. There is a way to have a federal blockchain, which is infinite security. It cannot be altered. And everybody's letters to the senator go on the blockchain. So they're publicly, on the record.
Oh.
And everyone knows how many letters are requesting that they do a particular thing. And so if they're being required to act on constituency majority, this blockchain will confirm what that majority is. Does that make sense to you?
That does. You might want to explain to people what blockchain is or what it means.
Okay, blockchain is nothing more than an electronic ledger, and it documents everything. But it documents everything in such a way that it's infinitely secured, because if you send a letter and I send a letter and 20 million other people send a letter, each one comes in chronologically in order, and the blockchain locks it into place. And so if you wanted to change that, you'd have to change the whole thing.
Gotcha.
And so it's very secure, and that's why they have cryptocurrency, because it's secured. It's on the blockchain.
Yes.
It can't be altered unless it's tampered with, and that fraud would become evident to the people.
Yeah. And that's a whole cybersecurity thing, which is, its own world.
Right.
So with respect to SoCal Edison, because Edison, they are the wires, they are delivering the service to the residents all over California or Southern California. What would you like to see change? What would you, in response to this letter? We both, generators aren't great. They burn diesel or petroleum or gasoline. What would you like to see them do? I mean, bury the wires, which will take probably a very long time and be very expensive, which is passed to the consumer, those costs. What would be your ideal thing? What would you like them to get out of this conversation?
Well, this has been the false information and false threat directed at the consumer, that, hey, if you want us to do the right thing, we're going to gouge you to such an extent that your electricity is going to go up to, $100 a day or, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that, right is right and solution is solution. Those power lines have no business being up in the air in the first place. So the premise that they can be held accountable for committing the crime in the first place is something that ought to be brought to the public's attention. Who permitted them to put those power lines above the ground in the first place in an area that they were fully aware were constantly hit, or not constantly, but frequently, let's say, with severe Santa Ana winds?
Yeah.
So it's negligent in the first place. I don't think there's anybody who would disagree that that was negligent construction.
It's
So,
funny, yeah, it's interesting you bring up who first put up the wires, because I don't know that answer. I
well,
don't I think it pre I
Edison is responsible for the technology that they are so-called passing on to the consumer.
No,
But
I
the
understand that, but the very first people who put up the poles, I think that predated the formation of SCE.
of the California Public, no, the Edison
No?
company put those poles. I mean, whoever put them up. The fact of the matter is that they have known ever since the beginning that that was a dangerous thing to do in the first place.
Oh, okay.
And so, and furthermore, if Edison's crying poor, they've been making billions of dollars of profits. And I'm sorry I didn't do the research before this meeting. However, I believe the CEO gets something in the neighborhood of 14 million a year.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Okay.
And if that's the case, and he's he's putting the consumer under duress and threat of exorbitant electricity costs, okay, then why don't we go back and say, hey, you're not worth those 14 million a year. You're stealing that money, or so to speak. I'm just saying it's kosher because the Public Utilities Commission or corporate governance says it's okay, you know.
Well, it's a
But
private entity. I mean, it's not a federal or state-run organization. They have shareholders. They have to do the return on investments. I get all that, but I understand what you're saying as well. You know.
you can say they're a private company, but the power lines are on public property. As a matter of fact, the power lines themselves and the telephone poles, as far as I understand, Edison does not own those. Those are public property.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. Okay.
if Edison is going to threaten the consumer with exorbitant prices just because they were negligent in the first place in creating a dangerous situation, which they have had to shell out, hundreds of millions of dollars for these fires,
Yeah.
the solution is there is a solution, and the solution is to put those cables underground. And this is a conversation that ought to engage the federal government. That if Edison can come back and say, hey, this is one part of the United States where it's not safe to have power lines above the ground. We need federal assistance to put these cables underground. Like, we can't sustain our business if we're required to put them underground or whatever. So they're basically, what it is, they created the original crime in the first place. I call it a crime because it's negligent. They create that in the first place, and then they're coming back and they're saying, well, let's just try to put up concrete poles. Let's just try to put like a band-aid over here and a band-aid over there, instead of fixing the problem. And the problem is that those poles are subjected to severe Santa Ana winds. So if they can't survive those winds, they have no right to punish people by shutting off their power altogether. That's my premise.
No, I agree. It's not fair to the residents and the citizens that they have their power shut off, especially during a holiday such as Thanksgiving. That was very taxing for some people. It's a big problem. I haven't spoken to anyone at SoCal Ed recently, so I can't really comment on this. But I do know that they are aware. I do know that they realize something needs to be fixed somehow, whether it's burying them or hardening the wires or whatever they come up with. I do like the fact that it probably should be a federal issue as well, primarily because we have the infrastructure bill that passed. So if there's any help there, I think that makes sense. And yeah, rates can be crazy. I do know that just from my own research that I've done in the past couple of years of just learning about energy, SoCal Edison changes their rates 6 to 7 times a year. That's bananas to me. That's a lot of work for the poor person that has to come up with all the rates and publish them and issue them and get them approved. That's a ton of work. So God bless them for going through that effort. But it is a lot. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be changed. What do you hope to get out of the letter? And you know, do you want City of Malibu to maybe play hardball? Is that what you're hoping they'll do?
I think they're required to do something. If they're going to represent the Malibu people, and we go around and we get the majority, the constituency of Malibu to chime in and express their view of their power being cut off for Thanksgiving because it's windy.
Yeah.
You know, this is a precedent that will go completely out of control. Pretty soon it'll be, there's going to be a solar flare up. We're going to turn off the electricity for 2 weeks. They're going to come up with every, excuse under the sun to keep punishing the consumer for their negligent construction in the first place. And so I think it really does. It's something that ought to go on the record that indeed the original construction was negligent, period. And if they say, well, we didn't have the technology, I disagree. I don't think they ever thought it out properly in the first place. However, if the federal government gets involved, because of course everybody in Malibu pays federal taxes to the tune of a lot of money, okay, then we want some of that money coming back to put these power lines underground. And it's not going to cost that much because it will cost probably a lot. But let's also acknowledge that the entire Broad Beach Road has no power lines. There's sections on Malibu Road that are underground. There's the Malibu West, the entire Malibu West home. I don't know how many homes there are here. I can't remember. It's a couple hundred or 400. I can't remember. But anyway, all those homes, all that power line is underground. Okay. So to say that it would take 100 years is not accurate. It's a lie. And furthermore, if they really unleash the proper resources and technology, I'm sure they said, okay, this will put this in perspective, and this issue ought to be brought into this conversation. Excuse me for the interruption.
No worries.
They promised the people, and I will keep using the word the people because we are the control group. We're the ones who should be telling or guiding them what to do. They shouldn't be the ones telling us what they're going to do under the threat of increasing their rates. Okay. But Gotcha. They promised the people that they were going to run fiber optic to the home all over the United States. And AT&T even published a headline saying that they were laying fiber optic at such a speed that it was like 300 miles an hour or something. I mean, they were they were saying that they were laying 5 miles of fiber optic per hour or something. They just had some claim about how fast they were laying fiber optic. Okay, so if they can do it that fast with fiber optic, why can't they do that with power lines? And you know what it boils down to? It boils down to getting a machine that can dig trenches. Okay. They have machines that pave miles and miles of highway, in a day,
Yep.
And so you're trying to tell me you can't dig ditches, for miles and miles in a day and put those power lines underground. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I get exactly what you're saying. Something does need to change. And it sounds like the people of Malibu, as well as other places, are voicing their opinions.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to share it to anybody who's listening in this meeting. What I shared with you at the beginning of this meeting is that I apologize if I was too driven or too charged, let's say, in my expression about what ought to be done. I'm a human being. I react when I see something's out of alignment. But I wanted to
Understood.
share what I shared at the beginning of this meeting, that if I allow them to disrupt my sense of well-being, then I've become ineffective, and people won't listen. If I'm
Oh,
coming from a place of peace and joy and happiness and say, hey, you guys, I believe there's a solution. Let's join together and make that solution sooner than later.
I am a huge proponent of collaboration, people working together. I mean, we're all in the same thing. We're all in the same boat, and we all need to work together. I mean, so I think that it is time for you to maybe spearhead the city of Malibu to reach out to the SoCal Edison folks and say, hey, let's figure this out. No one wants a fire again. That's a
Mhm.
given. Nobody wants fires, and cutting off the electricity sources. It's I was hoping that was only a short-term solution, but I don't know what the plans are going forward. I don't know.
It's not a solution. It's actually negligence, as I'm describing.
Yeah.
And they have no right to destroy everybody's Thanksgiving because they did not put those power lines underground. And they cannot claim that every single Santa Ana wind is going to create a fire. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get
That's
it.
what they're
Yeah.
acting on. So
An
this is
abundance of
not a good
caution.
precedent, you
No, and
know.
I mean, I get the abundance of caution on there, and they're
Mhm.
worried that this could start another fire, and I get that. I mean, the Woolsey fire was just awful, but it's not a solution. You're right. I honestly don't know an answer.
Mhm.
I
But
don't know.
I will. Mhm.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will say that if the California Public Utilities Commission is receiving payola from Edison, which I believe they are, I believe it's time for real transparency. I really do. And I believe that the city of Malibu is negligent for not standing up and protecting its people from this irresponsible, shutdown. I think they need to stand up and represent us instead of Edison. So that's my question: is how are they representing the Malibu people, as opposed to representing Edison in failure to say anything or do anything from this point forward?
It's a valid point. I
Hmm.
will not dismiss that point. That is very valid, and you have every right to speak your opinion. You
Right.
know,
That's what we're doing here. Freedom of speech.
yeah, and you have a right to your opinion and how you feel and what you feel needs to change. And it sounds like you're speaking on behalf of several neighbors, probably a few dozen neighbors, if I'm accurate.
Well, I would say, I think to say a few dozen is minimalizing. I would say probably every homeowner in Malibu. I would
Probably,
I
yes.
would contend that every homeowner, not just a few neighbors.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're absolutely. I don't live in Malibu, so
Mhm.
unfortunately I can't speak to this. That's why
But
I'm
but
talking with
but
you.
you're not in Malibu, and how do you feel about it?
I was upset to hear that my sister-in-law's Thanksgiving was canceled.
Mhm.
And she just said, well, we've got the backup generator going. And I thought, oh, diesel. But she just, honestly, she was rolling with it. She was making the best out of a terrible situation and just tried to still enjoy the holiday.
There is a solution. The silver lining here is that my friend whose house burned down in the Woolsey fire, he's done everything with solar. And I received an email this morning from my other colleague who moved to Ojai,
Hmm.
and he says he's totally on solar, and he says he wouldn't join this conversation today because he said the solution is simple. It's solar and battery power.
As long as you can afford to install it. I mean, that's another thing. Installing solar, that initial cost is a very heavy upfront cost. It pays itself in the end. People
It
don't forgive.
actually it actually is not as heavy as what people are being led to believe.
Well, a
The,
friend of mine just installed, and I asked him what he'd bought the solar, he bought the battery pack, and they did everything. It was 40,000.
for where?
Palm Springs.
Okay, in my friend who is a pilot for private jet aircraft, whose house burned down in the Woolsey fire, who lives up on here in Malibu, he was able to buy several prefab structures in the meantime while they were getting approval to rebuild their house,
Yeah.
and he was able to power those structures for over like $2,500 with solar and battery.
Just to power them. Yeah, I'm talking about the installation costs.
No, he said buying the solar and lithium batteries and putting them up and getting it operational. He told me about 2,500.
I want his contractor.
Yes. No, he did his own research. He specifically told me which lithium batteries and which equipment he was using. And he said it cost him about $2,500 for these structures that he was allowed to put up, the temporary modular structures.
I want the name of his person.
Yes. And he says it powers his Samsung dishwasher, washing machine, dryer, and so on.
I love hearing that, because I would like to put on solar, and people I've spoken to, when they say something like 40,000, you're like, oh, that's soul crushing. And I guess I'm gonna have to wait.
But by the same extent, if that's the case, here's where we can really make some solution, is make it a federal law that the federal government has to give you an extremely low rate loan for solar, where it can cost you $50 a month, let's say, and they're required, by federal law to give you those purchase loan rates, because we need solution and we need it now.
No, I agree with you on that. That would definitely help many, many communities to be able to put solar on their roofs. And hopefully someone will be working on that, because there is chatter. You need solar on every roof. Everything needs to change over to renewable energy. I'm a supporter of that. It's kind of my world. But on that note, thank you so much for sharing your beliefs. Thank you so much for sharing your information. I mean, the city of Malibu is a precious place. We want to keep it precious and safe. So let's see what we can change. Hopefully the city of Malibu responds, and someone from SoCal Ed is able to have a discussion and a collaboration, because we need to work on this together. We need to solve this problem together, and we need energy.
And I appreciate you putting up with all my, alleged, accusations and so on and so forth. You've been a really good sport in allowing me to express how I personally feel about what is taking place. But I think there's a bigger conversation about governance and responsibility and responsible construction and delivery of a public utility. So.
Fair enough. You know what? I can support everything you just said. There needs to be responsibility for the community, the well-being of everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You guys have a wonderful day, and we will see you next.